Today's project in the wood shop, a couple of easy to build but useful home decor items for the kitchen. So here we go. I'm starting out here with a cedar fence picket that are available at Big Blue or Big Orange. So it's 5.5 inches wide, about 6 feet long, and roughly 5/8 of an inch thick. I start out cutting two pieces 9 inches long. I measure for the first one and then use that one to set the saw for cutting the second one. Then I cut two pieces 7 inches long using the same method. You can kind of see here that this board is cupped a little, and you can also see by the end grain that it was cut very close to the pith or the center of the tree, which is why boards cup. After reviewing my plan, I decided I needed one more piece 9 inches long, so I cut that. So I have a total of 3 9-inchers and 2 7 inches long. I take one of the longer ones and 2 short ones over to the table saw, and I'm going to rip those down by an inch or so they end up about 4.5 inches wide. I'm going to do just a little bit of a dry fit here to see what it looks like. And I decide it needs a center divider, so I'm measuring to see how wide to cut it. This needs to be fairly precise, and I'll show you why later. But I cut on the heavy side a little bit of 3 1/8. Then I take the 2 shorter pieces that I ripped narrower back to the miter saw to do a miter. I'm taking the corners off one end of both of them at a 45-degree angle to a mark approximately 3/4 of an inch down from the end. I put a mark on the saw so I can flip them over and line up with that mark to cut the other corner off and have a match. Now on the same 2 pieces, I'm going to lay out for a finger hole, I guess you'd call it, or grab handles, if you will. Just going by proportion, I think an opening a little over 2 inches long would be good. And I'm going to hold it down about 3/4 of an inch from the top and make it about 3/4 of an inch wide. And since I want them to match, I'm going to put them together with double-sided tape so I can drill and cut them both at the same time. Since this is going to be a slot shape, I'm going to drill the ends out with a 3/4 inch Forstner bit in the drill press. Then after marking the lines from one hole to the other, I cut them out with a jigsaw. Now to get them apart without breaking them. Man, that tape works really well. Ah, success. Then it's over to the router table to put a very gentle roundover on the inside edges of the slots. I used a 3/16 radius roundover bit for this. After I do both of them, I give all the parts a sanding with the random orbit sander. I did a little bit on the belt sander as well to cheat on the cupping a bit and to take down the edges on one side and the center in the other. These fence pickets are rough sawn, so you could give them a little light sanding just to leave it mostly rough if you like that finish, or you can sand them down to smooth. I went somewhere in between. And the insides of the slots need some hand sanding. Time for assembly. I'm using a light amount of glue for this. You probably wouldn't need any at all, but I plan to use minimal nails, so I figure a little glue holding power wouldn't hurt. First, the back and the bottom. And these are going to be nailed in from the bottom, so they won't be seen anyway. I do a quick dry fit check to make sure my front is landing where I want it to. I had to trim off a slight amount on the center divider, but it looks good now. Put on a quick pencil mark at the center for lineup. Add glue and shoot one nail in the top of it. Then grab my small square to make sure I get it straight. Looks good. Then the front goes on. And after I decide which side I want facing out, I put the ends on. And there it is. But it needs more sanding, of course. Got to get the edges and kind of blend everything together. And I had to hand sand to get those inside edges along the reveal there. And I'll show you why I did it that way at the end of the video. I did some touch-up all over with the hand sanding. Then a little air blow gets rid of most of the sawdust. Hot in the shop today. Now we have a stick. Actually, this is a section of the top of a cedar tree that I had taken down at some point. But since it was laying around, I figured I might as well make good use of it. I just used my pocket knife to cut and scrape off the spindly, stringy stuff that passes for bark on these trees. I also do a little whittling here and there on the parts that are sticking out some, because I want to get this thing down to less than 1.5 inches in diameter from one end to the other. The one end isn't bad, it's pretty close, but I'll need to cut and sand down the bigger end some. I took it over to the belt sander to take down some of the spots where branches were coming out. And those are the parts that are the knots in boards, if you didn't know. I'm sure most of you know that, but if you didn't, that's your trivia fact for today. The belt sander is working pretty well, so I keep going until I get pretty close to what I need. And after a little workbench cleanup, I call it a day. The next morning, after a quick check, I took some more off on the belt sander and then gave it some hand sanding with a finer grit. Hand sanding works best on something like this that is an irregular shape. Your hand kind of conforms to the highs and lows automatically, and you can feel the areas that need more sanding, so you don't have to depend entirely on your eyes. And I realize the visual on working on something this shape, so try not to giggle. This is serious woodworking here. To go with that piece, I've got a round that I cut off of a cedar log, and I'm taking the outer layer of the weathered wood off at the bandsaw, down to a line I drew on there to keep a general diameter of about 6 to 7 inches, but not a perfect circle. You could also do this with a jigsaw or even hogging it off on the belt and disc sander. Or there's always the wood eater disc on the grinder. And if you don't have access, like I do, to this type of wood right in your own backyard, there are many sources online to buy log rounds or slices if you want to use them for projects like this. And speaking of the belt and disc sander, that's the next stop to clean up the edge all the way around and get rid of the uneven saw marks. Then I also take down the one edge that will be the top. I'm taking it off to make a natural transition from the top flat to the edge, but not to get it exactly even all the way around. I want it to look kind of random and more natural. Then I give it a good going over with the random orbit sander with about a 150 grit to smooth everything down. I marked a rough center of the round, which isn't the exact center of the grain, but close, to drill a pilot hole all the way through using a 1/8 inch bit. Then I put in a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to drill a relief or countersink for a screw, and I almost messed up here. I started lining up to drill, but realized at the last minute I was setting up to drill the top, and I want to drill for a screw coming through from the bottom. Crisis averted.
Whew, that was close.
I'm just going a random depth here, which will countersink the screw head, but also make it so I don't have to have as long of a screw to get through this thick round. Then I enlarged the through hole because I don't want the screw to bite into the round, only the piece that I'm going to screw to it. Now to assemble this piece. One screw and glue is the extent of it. I told you these projects were simple. I fussed around with it, turning it around a bit to see if one spot was straighter than another. It does need to be perfect, as the round and the upright aren't really perfect to begin with, but it will function just fine. I find a spot I like and call it good. Then for finish, I'm just going to use my hard wax oil. It should protect these just fine for what they're going to do. I just rub it on with a rag and let it soak in a while, and then rag off any excess. I like this stuff because it's natural and food safe for the kitchen, being just a mix of mineral oil and beeswax. Doesn't matter if you get it on your skin either. Some say it's even good for your skin. And yes, I was able to fit my hand inside so I could get that done as well. So there's two handy items for any kitchen. First I'll talk about the paper towel holder. I made that out of some materials I had laying around, a cedar round from a log and top of a small tree. And you can make these with this type of stuff if you don't have access to it. You can actually buy tree rounds or slices online, and I'll put a link in the description so you can look at some examples of that, various sizes and thicknesses. But you could also just use dimensional lumber to make a base and a dowel for the upright. For this, I made this out of actually less than one cedar fence picket. I think I had like over 2 feet of the board left over. So you could bang out a lot of these with a few fence pickets. The dimensions on this, this is 5.5 inches, the full width of the cedar picket, 9 inches long for the front and the back and the bottom. And these ends are 7 inches long. I made the slot. I think the drill centers were 1 3/8 or so. So the slot is about 2 1/8 inches long, I think, or something like that. And 3/4 inches wide. It's down 3/4 of an inch from the top. These are down 3/4 of an inch of the top from the top for the 45-degree miters. And the reason I set this back, if you look at the back, I made it flush. But these boards, these fence pickets are always cupped a little bit. On the back, I got rid of it by just sanding it down to meet the edge. That's one way to kind of hide it. But on the front, I set it back a little bit, put a reveal in here, and even though this board is slightly cupped, when it's a gap like this in a shadow line, you don't really notice it. So it's a good way to hide it, just setting it back in there like that. So that's why I did that way. Now, if you didn't need one this big or this long, you could easily just cut it in half and make one half that size. The inside dimension is 3 1/8, so you could make a 3 1/8 or 3 inches square, and that would be enough to hold several kitchen utensils. So that's it, I guess. Hope you enjoyed the video and the project. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.